do is in about a minute, I will also turn off my video and then we'll focus on the slide deck that is there and then use that as the anchor for the rest of the session. Okay, so it's about 6:06 now. Uh, we will, try and keep a good time so that we are able to let you go at 7:30. And also, what I was thinking we will do is we will use the chat feature in Zoom. If you have any questions or if you want to draw my attention, or just unmute yourself and interrupt me at any time, that should also not be a problem. Uh, so if you are hearing me, go ahead and in your chat box, just send a message to say you're okay with this plan, or if you have another alternative suggestion, please feel free to do that. Okay, so we have one person. All right, so Ashish says good evening. Hi Ashish, welcome. uh, Arpita and Ashish have responded. I hope the others are also okay with this plan. So what I'll do is I'll turn off my video for now, and then we will move to the slide deck and begin the session for today. All right, so let's begin. Today is the second session. We've had a long break, and I hope you remember something from what we did in the last session, the first session on the 7th of November. So, a quick recap on what we did in the first session. Going forward, what you will notice is that on some slides, you'll see this toolbox, right? This toolbox, which is an indicator for you that whatever is on the slide is something that you can use as a tip or an additional tool that you put in your toolbox. Okay, so this recap is an important tool in doing any kind of training program which extends beyond one session. Right, so even if you're doing a 1 day program and you come back after a tea break or you come back after lunch, you want people to be able to realign them or reorient them to where you left them off. uh, because oftentimes what happens is we forget some of the uh, important things or useful things from a previous session for a lot of reasons. So doing a quick recap and setting the context right is an essential tool in your trainer toolkit, which is what we will do now. So last week we did a small session or a small bit on trying to find out what your expectations from this program were. And again, you'll see that there is a toolbox in on this slide as well, which is to say, in your training, whenever you become a trainer, or going forward in your training, it's always good to know what your audience expects from you, right? So that way you know what you have to be speaking to, and also if you're not going to be addressing something, to be able to manage the expectations of your particular audience. All right, so last week the class came up with these as expectations. I've just reworded and rearranged them for ease of reading. One is to learn concepts with practical examples. We will try and do that whenever we, introduce a concept or discuss a concept. I will try and bring in some practical examples. And if I don't do it, just stop me, send a message on chat or unmute yourself and ask a question to ask me to explain or give you an example. I'd be happy to do that. Case studies, yes, we will look at some case studies as well uh, during the program. Some of the One of the questions was, what is the alignment of OD with LND? We will look at that. Relationship between OD, training analytics, and ROI. We will look at that as well. Some of them in not much detail, but we will address each of them at least briefly so that you know what the connection between each of these different domains are. Overlap of OD and change, so that is part of the session, the program itself. How to develop a structured approach for change management, that is what we will be doing in the program. Why is OD such a hot thing? Again, completely part of the program. Learn from others about the latest in the field. Okay, so this is something where you will also have to jump in and contribute in terms of what you're reading, what you're learning, and what you're experiencing in your life. Okay, so that was your expectations. We also spent some time working out some ground rules. Again, you'll see a toolbox on this slide, which again indicates that it's important for everyone in a particular program to know what the ground rules are, which is what are the rules of engagement, what will guide our behavior, what will guide our outlook, how will we comport ourselves, what will we do. Because if you don't have a common understanding of what is expected behavior in a session, in a program, in an organization, or on a project, then there is going to be anarchy. And that's usually not a good thing for trying to get anything accomplished. Okay, so spending time establishing ground rules or clarifying ground rules is an important technique in your toolkit, right? And this goes even for change management as well, because once you embark on a change management program, you will need people to be on the same page. Basically, what ground rules mean is that everyone is on the same page. And so we agreed to do 9 things, right? So I have reworded the ground rules from the last week to start everything with we will, right? So it's a collective responsibility that we will participate, we will give and receive constructive feedback, and so on. Uh, right? So this is ground rules. I also kind of said we are going to revise the outline a little bit in order to make it a little more logical. So in the course plan that was given to you, OD was placed first and change management happened next. I have just reversed the order, nothing much. We will cover everything that is there that needs to be covered in OD and change. So you remember we talked about VUCA last week, which is that the world that we live in has increasingly become volatile. Volatility simply means that there is a lot of fluctuation uh, within a particular region or in a particular thing. Uncertainty has increased. There are uncertainty about the future. Complexity is simply that there are too many moving parts that one needs to work on in trying to manage a particular situation. And ambiguity is the lack of clarity of something. And so we looked at another picture last week, if you remember, that volatility is fluctuation. So if you look at the stock market index, if you just look at the stock market index for a month or a year, you will see these jagged edges. There's a lot of fluctuation that is there. uh, but as you zoom out, you might see that, okay, there seems to be a trend line. Either it is falling down or it's going up. But in a short period of time, there is going to be a lot of fluctuation. Again, uncertainty is that the range of possibilities in the future, is not certain, is not one or two, but the options could be many. Complexity, too many moving parts, too many variables that you need to figure out. Ambiguity, again, there's a lack of clarity. Okay, so this is something we talked about for quite a bit last week. We also spent a lot of time, I think, on trying to get this thing idea that in change management, or when you talk about change management, there are all these fads that seem to have had some their 15 minutes of fame in the world. And so anyone who has learned something quickly goes and tries to popularize it. And studies have been done which have tried to capture what is the longevity of a particular uh, you know management technique or tool, or way of doing something. And they all seem to have a lifespan that is about a 5 years, 10 years life cycle, after which something else comes up. And a lot of stuff is basically repackaging of something that was already there, right? So this was one of the charts that we looked at. I remember I also showed you that there are numerous books and articles that have been written about organization change and organization development over the decades. And it often becomes quite confusing to figure out, okay, so what is going on, what is true, which model do I choose, which one is going to be useful for me in my organization, in my personal life, in anything that I do. And so we ended up on this picture of a hammer. And the thing that we picked up, the insight we picked up from this was that if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So if we go back to the previous slide where we say, okay, so I have acquired some certification in quality circles, or in lean management techniques, or in Six Sigma, or agile organizations, or TQM, whatever, I tend to start pushing that as the only solution, not one of the solutions, but as the only solution. And I've seen people who undergo some certification in a particular psychometric tool. So, say, for example, I know of people who've acquired a certification in administering the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, or the Hogan's profile, or even Six Sigma, or they have done they've acquired a certification in leadership coaching or executive coaching. And so that becomes the only solution, panacea. I mean, they see that as the panacea for all of the problems, right? So it's like a carpenter having just a hammer. There's not enough uh, tools in the toolkit to be able to figure out. So if you remember, having you go to a dentist, the dentist has different tools for doing different things in your mouth. I mean, like, he uses a syringe to give you an anesthetic. He uses a pick to pick out plaque and clean the teeth. He uses a drill, to basically drill a hole if you need to fill a cavity. And he uses a suction pump to remove the water or the saliva. Lots of tools are there. And if you don't have those tools, it just simply means that you're like the carpenter with a hammer. Also, what it tells is that there is a fundamental gap in that person's understanding of the concepts. Because if you know, so for example, if I know the basics, if I know the foundational aspects of managing change or organizational development, I can come up with my own methods, right? If I know and understand the concepts. But if I don't know the concepts, then all I'm left with is this tool that I need to keep using for anything and everything. Okay, so it's the difference between knowing how to do something and knowing why you are doing something. you know to use a more simpler example, is the difference between a mechanic, I'm not deriding mechanics, or a mechanic and an engineer, right? A mechanic knows how to do, change the oil filter, or replace the oil, or service your machine. An engineer knows why to do it. And then, if you're being a little more pedantic, you can say the physicist knows the basic underlying science behind anything that the engineer knows, right? So the physicist in the hierarchy of things has a more fundamental knowledge of machines and such. Okay, and we looked at this slide also, which is to say planned organization change is managing the future from the present. And the point over here was, in this particular program, we are going to talk about planned change, not a reaction to a catastrophe that happens. So tomorrow, say there is an earthquake and the office building collapses, or there is a major breach in the road that leads to your office. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with getting people to work or not work? So those are all unforeseen, unplanned events, right? But planned change is where you have a deliberate uh, course of action for what you will do in order to manage the future from the present. So that's the big thing over here. It is managing the future and not just the present, right? So what you're doing is being able to foresee what will happen in the future and putting things in place today in order to be able to manage that. And this is where we actually stopped off. We looked at this question of trying to ask, what is organization change? We said organization change is a planned alteration of organizational components to improve effectiveness of the organization, and that these components include things like the organization's vision, mission, goals, strategy, structure, processes, etc. Okay, so this is where we stopped off last week. Are you folks with me? Talk to me. Either send me a message or unmute yourself and say something.
Yes, we're with you.
Very nice. Thank you, Arpita. Ashish also says yes. Okay, so let's move on. So when you look at what are this organizational components? Okay, so what are the organizational components? One way to look at it, a toolkit again. So this is a tool. I'm sorry, I didn't get my toolbox over here for this. So this is a tool to to understand what are the different components of an organization. So this framework was developed by consultants at the McKinsey consultancy in the early 80s, and this has been a fairly useful tool that people use it even to this day, right? So what it basically, are you folks familiar with this? Have you seen this or heard of McKinsey's 7S framework before? Unmute yourself, say yes or no, or
No,
send a.
no, I have not heard. This is
You've
new.
not heard. Okay, okay. I'll just give 30 seconds so that if somebody has knows about it, it doesn't matter if you don't know it in detail. That's okay, but at least you've heard about it. Okay, Arpita has heard about it. Okay, so what it basically says is that an organization is made up of seven different things, and they're all interrelated. So you will see that there are lines that go from each of these bubbles to every other bubble. So there are seven components over here. So that's why they've called it seven, and S because every of those bubbles has a word that starts with the letter S. Okay, and because this is McKinsey and company, they're famous for coming up with seven S's, three P's, four C's, five C's, and so on. Because it's easier for people to remember, and it helps us. So the 7S framework is one of the ways in which we can understand an organization's components. You will see that I don't know if your screen is picking up the difference in color, that you have shared values in the middle, is in a different color. You have strategy, structure, and systems in a slightly different color. And then you have skills, style, and staff in the lower half in a different colored bubble. Let me briefly kind of just go through each of these things, and I'll try not to be too long-winded about it. Strategy simply is the plan devised to give you a competitive edge. It's your action plan to fulfill your vision. uh, Structure is, what is your organization structure? What are the reporting relationships like? What is the communication flow? How does data flow? Where are you located? That kind of thing. Organization structure. Systems, what are your activities? What are your standard operating procedures? What are your processes for doing anything? What is, how does work get done? If I have to apply, if I have to get go on vacation, what is the process? Do I just call up my boss and tell him, hey man, I'm kind of going out on vacation from next week? Or do I have to send an email? Do I have to fill out an application form? What is the process? What is the system in place to do that, right? So I just gave you an example of taking leave, but it could be for anything. What is your invoicing procedure? What is the ordering procedure? What is the way to pay somebody at the end of the month? Whether it's salary or if it's a vendor, how do you make vendor payments? What is your attendance system like? Do people have to come and put their thumbprints or iris scan, sign in a register, or just walk in because everybody knows each other? What is the system? So that's what system means over there. The shared values is, what is the core beliefs of the company, right? So that gets seen in when you talk about the company's culture. We'll spend some time on the culture aspect of it a little bit as well. uh, and then the other three S's in the lower part. Style, which is again, how does your organization culture manifest itself in leadership? Is it a very hierarchical sort of thing where people have to get permission to do certain things? Is the leadership top down? Do they allow for discussion? Is it more flat in terms of how decision making works? What is the style in which work gets done? Staff, basically employees and their capabilities. So if you're a computer startup or a technology startup, what's the talent pool in your organization? If you're a electricity company, what is the talent pool? If you're a manufacturing company, what is the tool, what are the capabilities of your employees? Skills, what actual skills and competencies do the employees possess? Okay, so in this framework, the top half are called the hard S's, and the bottom half is called soft S's, because they're a little more intangible than the top ones. And all of that is actually held together by the shared values. So the way things work is, let me see, how do I, uh, the shared values, the core beliefs of the company inform everything, inform every other part of the organization components. One other important aspect of this 7S framework is, you'll notice that because every bubble is linked to every other bubble in this particular image, for anyone trying to change any one of the components will have to factor in the impact of change in one component on all the other components. Meaning to say, I cannot change my company strategy without making appropriate changes in the structure, system, style, staff, and skills. And also to see if it is aligned with the values of the company. Okay. Similarly, if I am trying to introduce a new system of working, I have to be aware that I have to make some changes to the competencies of my people, right? So I cannot bring in a high tech machine and not have trained people ready to operate that high tech machine, right? So it's a fairly after a while it becomes, oh wow, why didn't I know this before? It seems so obvious in hindsight, right? So the 7S framework is a useful way to understand what organizational components need to change or need to be altered to improve organizational effectiveness. Any questions? Let me give you 30 seconds to ask me a question. All right, so no questions means can mean one of two things. One is, boss, I have just muted my audio and video and I've walked out of the session. Two, I didn't understand anything. Three, well, let's just stick with two. Which one is it?
Hi, Neelam here. I just
Hi.
had, hi, I was just thinking in this framework,
Hmm.
although the IT, systems have not been placed anywhere, where in today's world they're extremely important.
Right.
So I was wondering where would they fit in the 7S framework?
Okay. So in terms of, see, IT is basically a tool, right? So IT is not an end in itself. It's an enabling tool for you. Okay.
Right,
Right. So IT will come under your. It will be part of your system in terms of uh, if your communication is completely in the organization is completely through, say, email or through chat, or you have your own customized audio video
applications.
interface,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Some
right.
application that you have developed for yourself. So that will all be part of the systems of that particular organization. So IT uh,
Part of the
will come
systems.
on, will be part of the system. Yeah.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Ashish, my good friend, yeah, thank you for the question and observation, Neelam. Ashish, my friend, you don't have to call me professor, just call me Ted. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's move on from McKinsey. All right, so we said, what is organization change? We said organization change is the planned alteration of organizational components to improve organizational effectiveness. And what are those organizational components? We said, hey, these are the 7 different organizational components that need to change. And because each of these components are linked to the others, we have to be careful that if we are plan to do make some change in one of the components, that we are aware that it will have some impact on other components as well. And so we have to plan for those things accordingly. So next question, why organization change? Why do organizations change? What makes them change? Okay, so there are a couple of ways in which you can look at this question. Firstly is to say, what motivates change. And it's so three things that pop out are, One is that it's a reaction to adversity in the present. So, for example, we are all living through this COVID-19 pandemic. From, say, March 22nd onwards, things have been very, very different in India and in some parts of the world, even before or in much later than March as well. So, uh, organizations have had to make some changes, right? Either moving from to work from home, to closing down businesses, to you know trying to one other reaction has been that they are like a deer in the headlights where they don't know what to do. So they are stunned, they're stuck, they're in shock. They've seen their vendors disappear. Employees have become very apprehensive about the future of their careers. So a whole bunch of things have happened, and organizations change, people change as a reaction to whatever adversity they face in the present. So, as a reaction to COVID 19, companies have started putting systems and processes in place that will allow remote working or online working for some people, right? So, they've started becoming a little more open with flexible working hours. They have started making some investments in completely even transitioning in the way things are done. Professor Kaushal, earlier, just before the start of the session, was mentioning about how uh, IT companies like Infosys and TCS are contemplating moving up to 75% of their work online, work from home. So for them, this adversity has made them move in completely different ways. Schools and colleges have started having a lot of their programs online. I mean, most of their programs online. Even this particular course, which would have normally been an in class kind of thing on a weekend, has become a completely online program, right? So, uh, a reaction to adversity in the present. Another motivation is that you prepare for the future. You see what is going on. Your company is not impacted negatively now, but you anticipate that things can go differently in the future. And so you start making some investments in change, right? So you either send some people for getting some new training, or you invest in some new technology. Maybe you shift locations, you change your product line, you change your pricing. Anything that you do as a way to prepare for the future. And a third reason why companies would change is learning from the past, right? So large companies which have the bandwidth and the resources to invest in think tanks, or have some consultants come and do some study for them, will pick up some trends or some patterns from their past to say, like, hey, it seems like in the last 50 years, the number of new products that have come out uh, has not been optimal. So let's do and make some change. So one of the classic examples in this for this particular thing is the company 3M. Have you heard of the company 3M? I'm sure you have. Anyone who has used a post-it or a sticker or anything like that is aware of 3M. That company started off as a mining company, right? So the 3Ms basically stands for, I think, Minnesota Minerals and Mining, or Mining and Minerals, right? So a company based out of Minnesota in the US. uh, because they kept adding so many products in their product line, they junked the Minnesota Minerals and Mining to 3M. So 3M has a stated policy that up to 25% of revenues in every year will come from products that were introduced in the last, I believe, 5 years, right? So So which is why they have so many products. I could be wrong, mistaken, either it was 1 year or 5 years, but so leaving that aside, their plan that they need to be able to uh, have more products that will generate revenue for them every year. So this is a learning that they picked up from looking at their product line in the past. Okay, so this is one way to look at why organizations change. Another way is a couple of theories that these two guys, Michael Beer and Nitin Noria, came up with. It's a quite a famous article that they published in the Harvard Business Review about 20 years ago. They call it Theory E and Theory O. It's simply this, right? So, not to get too hassled or intimidated by what these theories mean. One is that is more economic focused, right? So, Theory E only focuses on how do I improve my company's bottom line, my top line, the profitability or shareholder value, right? And so is purely focused on that aspect. The other theory, Theory O, speaks more towards how do I improve my organization's capabilities. So, which is can I train my employees, uh, give them some additional skills? Uh, can I bring in some new technology? That can I change the systems in my organization? Anything that will help build the organization's capabilities to face the future, right? So you will typically kind of see a lot of these capital intensive, huge organizations usually will have, say, something called a disaster management plan, right? So a power company or a manufacturing company will have a disaster management plan that kind of basically tells people what to do should a disaster happen anywhere, an accident anywhere in the organization, what they should do. And in order to be able to, for the employees to respond to a disaster, they need to have certain capabilities, right? So one way is that disaster management plan helps build certain other capabilities within the organization. Okay. uh, so let's see a little more about this. Again, I hope the slide is clear. Don't get too, hassled by all the different things that are there. I'll just walk you through what these things mean. I'll not spend too much time on everything, but just to give you the big picture. So on the leftmost side over here, what you have is what are the dimensions of change? The goals, the leadership. What is the focus of the change? What the process will look like? Reward system and use of consultants. So these are the dimensions that Michael Beer and Nitin Noria, have identified as being important when you are to consider theory E and theory O, right? So you can also see theory E and theory O as on a spectrum. Theory E is more money focused. Theory O is more people focused. Okay, so if that is a dichotomy that you can think of. So theory O looks at maximizing shareholder value. And in fact, like what I will do is after today session, I will maybe share this article with you. This Are you folks up to reading extra stuff more than the two assigned readings you have? Say yes or no, and then
Yes,
we'll
yes,
take it.
yes.
Yeah, so you're okay with additional readings. Okay, so these are
Yeah.
readings for your own pleasure. I mean, I'm not going to test you on this or any of those things, but it's a good thing to have for you. Uh, it's called Cracking the Code of Change. So this is from that particular article. So leadership is top down. It's very directive. the leader says, hey, do this, do that, and that's it. So the article has a case study of a company called Scott Paper, where the new CEO comes and immediately fires off thousands of people because he needs to improve the bottom line and maximize shareholder value. And that's the way that particular CEO saw, how change should happen in his company. Okay, so the process is that there is a definite plan, and programs are established to get that plan in process. uh, there's some incentives provided, financial incentives to motivate people, and the consultants are called upon to come up with definite solutions for how things will get done. So this is a theory is a very directive, very top down, just do as I say sort of a way to bring about organization change. Theory O, on the other hand, is more bottoms up. It kind of builds employee capabilities, looks at changing behaviors and attitudes. Participation is encouraged. There's a lot of experimentation, and any use of consultant is more to support the organization in coming up with its own solutions. Okay, so what the authors say is that because these two theories lie on either end of the spectrum, it's not advisable for organizations to pick any one of them in its purest form, right? So every organization will have to look at its own context and come up with some sort of a mix. So this is the mix. What does the combined form look like? Okay. All right. So let's not hang on. So there's a question: can another reason for organization change also be competition? Yes, competition. This particular thing is adversity to the present. So the present could be anything, right? So it could be competition from others, uh, it could be a health emergency, it could be a policy change, right? So say the government uh, suddenly says we are banning X thing from tomorrow, right? And suddenly, what do? Or they allow a new competitors to come. So for example, in today's newspaper, there was this bit that the RBI has recommended that the Banking Regulation Act be uh, modified to allow for large companies to operate their own banks. Until now, that was not allowed. A banking company has to be separate from any other company. But now, what will happen is the number of banking companies can increase. Now, what does that mean for a regularly established bank? So, HDFC or Axis or ICICI Bank, how will they see the entry of, say, a Reliance Bank or any other large company, a Tata Bank or whatever, right? There are some criteria that they've set, that the minimum capital has to be 1,000 crores and all those things. But which usually means that only a large company will be able to afford that sort of capital input. Maybe an Amazon bank, right? What does that mean? So change is motivated, again, competition, by policy change, by the introduction of a new technology, anything. Okay, so good point, Neelam. Thank you for that. All right, so this was a little bit about uh, theory E and theory O. I will post that article for you and you can read it and learn a little more. There are a couple of case studies in the article which you can read on your own time. Okay, question. So we looked at what is organization change, we've looked at why organization change. Now the next question for us is, when should organizations change? When should organizations change? So let's consider this. Okay, so if we were to plot the life cycle of a particular organization on this X and Y axis, where X axis has time and the growth is on the Y axis. Growth could be in terms of profitability, profitability, revenues, production, whatever. You can decide what is your thing for growth, and then variable for growth, and then we can go with it. Typically, this is not exactly how it happens, but typically this is the way it'll work. Okay, so let me just explain what is going on in this curve. So you have a great new product, and then you see some tremendous growth in the beginning, tremendous growth, and you're so caught up in what is happening that you start becoming complacent. So you start resting. Oh, so I have a new technology, and it has made me a zillionaire, billionaire, whatever, and I become complacent. Over time, growth plateaus out. I'm not getting new customers. My profits have not, are not increasing. Footfalls are stable, but they are not increasing, neither or decreasing. Now, because I have been so good, the momentum is carrying me through. Again, in terms of time factor, don't get too bogged down that, oh, the plateau is for such a long time. No, I'm just, I want you to understand the idea behind it, which is that if you don't do anything, after a while, your success will stop and you will start plateauing, and you'll see that this curve kind of goes down. So you don't do anything, after a while, your organization starts to decline. Okay, so if you don't make any changes, interventions, whatever, your company will decline. So if we see this as the way the organization's life cycle is, when should an organization change? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some points over here, and then use the chat feature or unmute yourself and tell us which is the right point for organizations to change. Okay, so let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Where do you think an organization should start thinking of change? 4. Okay, so 2 people have indicated 4. Can we get some more responses? Change, Arpita says, change is needed at all points. However, 3 onwards, definitely. Okay. Perceive plateau, introduce change. Ptolemy says 4 and 6. Okay. All right. So here is an interesting, you know, conundrum for you. You've heard of this, saying that says, "Why rock a boat? If everything is going well, why do you want to rock the boat?" So it becomes really difficult to get people in the organization to think about change at 1. At 8, it's fairly easy to tell them why they need to change. At 1, at 2, when it's going up, it's difficult. 3 also is difficult. 4, well, people are like, well, it's plateauing, so what? I mean, I don't see the plateau yet. 5 and 6, yeah, they start recognizing that there's a plateau. Okay. So where should an organization change? Ideally, the organizations will change at 3. Okay, so uh, good for Arpita to have identified three. But let me say, it is really, really difficult for a leader to convince an organization to change at three because you don't know you're going to be plateauing at three. So, this is what we get in hindsight, right? So, in hindsight, when we can see the entire picture, it's easy for us to point out and say, let's do change is needed at three. Basically, what it is saying is you change when you're doing well, right? So that's the idea. The idea is you change when you're doing well, because that is when you have resources to, and also you have the luxury of making some change. So, should some change initiative not work out well, you have enough resources or a buffer to be able to handle the shock. At eight, I mean, like you're gasping for breath. Four, five, and six, your tolerance is kind of like, for failure is low, right? So you want to be very careful of what you do. One, two, and three is when you should be doing it. Okay, so uh, but one and two is definitely going to be difficult. Three, again, it's going to be difficult. So anyone who has invested in the stock market or played the stock market as a trader, you'll know that you can't predict the high, right? You don't know when it is going to be high. You can broadly over time say, yes, if I invest today, after about 3 or 4 years, the trend is that my stock will improve. But on a day to day basis, I cannot predict. So, which means at three, I really don't know if the next stage for my organization is a plateau. At two, I don't know again whether I will continue to rise or whether I'm going to plateau from here itself. Okay. So, what is the way out of this? So, the way out of this is to be always vigilant, always vigilant. And when you're doing really well, is when you start allocating time and resources to start experimenting with small change initiatives. So, that way, you start building your organization's capabilities to weather anything that happens in the future, right? So a company that has done well with just one product should start thinking in terms of, hey, what's my competition like? Uh, go to some go read some scientific journals to find out what kind of work laboratories and people are working on, so that they don't end up becoming a competitor for you, right? So a particular product shouldn't become a competitor for you. Take, for example, we are using Zoom as the interface tool for this online course. Zoom was nowhere before the pandemic came. I mean, like people would only say Skype, right? They would use Skype or any other video conferencing tool that was out there. Uh, but Zoom came out of nowhere because suddenly they just seemed to be positioned in the right place at the right time to leverage this particular event. Okay. So, when to change? Ideally, one, two, and three. Four, five, and six. Well, I mean, if you don't change even then, you're out. So there's this interesting article by Jim Collins, not an article. This is from his book called "How the Mighty Fall: Why Some Companies Never Give In." Jim Collins is the guy who wrote a very famous book called "From Good to Great." Back in the 2000s, early 2000s, this was a major thing at the time, and so he captures what is the five stages of decline in a company. It kind of charts the same course that we looked at in the previous slide, which is in the beginning, you're doing really well. So there is a lot of hubris, there's a lot of pride. You're blinded by your success. You're blinded by your success. Uh, Oftentimes, that gets to your head, as they say. and you start kind of behaving like the only way the future will turn out is you'll always be going on top. Okay. And it keeps going. You start seeing that your weekly reports, your monthly reports are showing that there is stagnation or anything, that there has been either stagnation or some fall somewhere. And you start explaining those things away by saying, oh, this is just a one-off incident, this will not this too shall pass, stuff like that. So you start living in denial, and then suddenly you have some change. People have just left your product, your organization, your service, and they've gone to somebody else in hordes, and then you're grasping for salvation. So for example, think about it. In 2016, uh, actually, let's go back to 2013. 2013 was when the Department of Telecom, the telecom ministry, made a policy change that allowed for a company like Reliance Geo to happen. Okay. The genesis was around in 2013. 2016 is when Geo made its big grand entry into the Indian uh, in the mobile and data world. The telecom industry is very different now than it was in before Reliance Geo came in, right? So what happens? Entrenched companies like Idea, Airtel, Vodafone, they thought they could just keep skating with their large fees or rates, their shoddy services, whatever. Reliance comes, offers a free data for life, or free voice calls, data at dirt cheap rates. I think it was 149 rupees or something a month back in the day, and then completely change everything. Now Reliance is the has the largest number of subscribers in a short period of 4 years. Completely demolished the competition, who are struggling with huge debts running in like tens of thousands of crores. Yeah. So this is what happens when companies don't keep scanning the environment to see what is the threat in their what is the adversity in the present that they need to prepare for or address. All right, so here's a toolkit for you, right? Something in your to add to your toolkit about when to do organization change. This is again from an article from the Harvard Business Review. It's called Change for Change's Sake, written by three academics. uh, if you're interested, I can post this article as well. Let me give you a couple of minutes to read this chart. Basically, what it says is that there are 12 questions. You only have to answer give a simple yes or no. If you have less than two or less than two yeses, then you're okay. You don't have to change at the moment. 3 to 7 yeses, good times to start changing. 8+ yes answers would mean that you have to have started your change process a long time ago. So look at this particular uh, questionnaire and ask yourself, answer these questions for your own company that you're in. And what is your score? Let me give you a minute to read this. Okay, so maybe when you read the article a little more about this particular assessment tool, uh, will become clearer for you. And this is something that you can use, and use this from time to time, in order to get a sense of you know what's the state in your particular organization. If you're a manager, if you can give this to your manager, or if you're the manager, do this, once a quarter, maybe once in 6 months, 4 months, whatever works for you in terms of time, depending on the nature of your organization. What is the life cycle in your organization? If it's where turnaround times are fairly quick, then you may want to do this maybe even monthly, or once in 2 months. But if you're an organization which is more stable, different sector, then maybe once a year also should be good. But doing this will at least give you a sense. It'll give you a data point to think about what to change. Okay, so let's move on. So what are the types? So we looked at what is organization change, why organization change, when to do organization change. And so also, like, okay, so if we're looking at all these questions, so what are the types of organization change? What are the different ways in which organizations can change? This is from, again, Harvard Business School's book series on managing change and transition. So they identify four types of things that you can do, right? So structural change, process change, culture change, and cost cutting. Briefly, I'll tell you what these things stand for. Structural change is simply that you know uh, you're trying to reconfigure your organization's reporting relationships, communication flow, uh, anything that will help better to improve communication, right? Improve better communication, which will mean that there is faster decision making or better decision making, which will then help things work better. Structural change could also mean, say, you're relocating your manufacturing facility from or your office from one location to the other, in order to be closer to your customer, to your vendor, to the source of your raw material, whatever, right? So structural change could be any one of those things. uh, Process change is, again, a change in the way you do something within your company. So earlier I talked about what is the process for getting leave in your organization. Maybe currently you have to uh, sign in, fill out a form, give it to your manager, who will sit on it for a couple of days, and then maybe send it to HR, and then HR kind of comes back and then tells you yes or no, whatever, right? Or and then you need to move to a more real time process, where uh, you have a portal that allows you to enter your request, and then all the approving layers will look at it within a particular day. You can even set it for a particular time, that by when people will have to respond, and then you have your decision, maybe by the end of the day, if not in a day or so, whichever works. So anything like that. Or you have brought in a new way to run your assembly line. Some change you've made in the process over there, that will cut the number of steps that you have to do something. Maybe you've eliminated some decision layers, whatever, anything to do with changing the process. The third one is culture change, right? So if I'm trying to embark on getting my people to start thinking differently. So one of the things that Professor Kaushal mentioned just before the class started was, one of the faculty members was very apprehensive about doing an online course, right? So an online course, because he or she has been conditioned to doing courses in a more face to face, in person sort of environment. And so the mindset needs to change to say that online is also okay. I mean, there are people who will vehemently oppose online by saying the efficacy of an online course is suspect. It is very poor compared to offline, and all those things. But we'll have to figure out some way to do stuff, right? So if the choice is between no program or an online program, then it is very clear you have to do the online program, because not doing it is does not lead to anything at all, right? So it's a waste of opportunity. So in the organization, it could be anything. You want to change a particular behavior, you want to change a mindset, you want to change an attitude towards something, culture change. Cost cutting, simply, uh, a very focused way of change, where you're looking at some small things or even large things. Like, so it's like a company comes and says, I need to improve bottom line, or I need to reduce cost, so I eliminate certain businesses completely, right? Or I retrench a whole, or lay off a whole bunch of people, or I close a particular division. Anything that will uh, work towards cutting cost. So broadly, these are the four types of changes that can take place. Okay. uh, Let me pause for a minute and check. Do you have any questions so far?
Ted, I
Oh,
have a related question.
okay.
These days, there's a lot of talk about agile thinking. What is
Right.
that about exactly?
Okay. So can we move
If
this
we can do it
question
later,
to,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I just wanted to put it on this thing.
okay, so let me kind of like maybe address it now itself, instead of putting it off for now. So agile is basically what is agile? What is your understanding of agile? So when you think of agile,
Hmm. Which means
what
shifts or
pictures?
change, frequent changes or shifting the according to the need is what my understanding is.
Okay, good point. So agility simply means responsiveness, right?
Yeah,
Responsiveness. So how
yeah.
quickly do you respond to something? So I'm agile means I'm quick to doing certain things. So a deer is agile, a cheetah is agile. Okay, a tortoise is not agile. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So agile organization is basically responsiveness. How do I improve response times, responsiveness of the organization?
Hmm.
So there are various techniques that are available to build agility into the way things are done in an organization.
Hmm.
Okay. So maybe next week I will have a slide on that, so that because otherwise
Sure,
by the time
sure.
I
Definitely. Yeah, yeah.
pull it up from my this one, it'll take a little time. So
No
next
worries.
week,
Yeah.
I will put a slide on agile, because we can actually talk about it in the process itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
good point
Thank
for
you.
you to bring.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. uh, what does improve companies bottom line mean? Excellent question. Can someone answer that question? Polomy asks, what is improve company's bottom line?
Sir, improvement in the sales figures, the revenue generation for the organization.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. It's
Mm,
actually the other way around.
it's
Improving revenues is top line.
the gross profit. Is it or
Profits or
the EBIT? Yeah.
profitability is
Hmm.
bottom line.
Hmm.
Okay, so uh, improving sales, improving production is all top line growth. Bottom line is profitability. At the end of the day, what is the profits that I take home?
Okay.
Okay, that
Okay.
is bottom line. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so I have another 14 minutes. Let's see what else I have lined up. So here's another tool for your toolbox. Okay, so we've looked at what is change, why change, when to change, types of change. And then let's ask this question: what is the readiness for change? is your organization ready? Okay, so we did that corporate cholesterol test, right? The assessment, the yes or no 12 question assessment test 2 slides ago. So this is another way to look at readiness for change. This particular formula was developed, over a period of 20 years by a couple of people. Originally developed by this guy called David Gleicher. It had different terms. The letters were different, slightly different, but the concept was it was the same. What this basically says is this: if you want change to take place, then there has to be dissatisfaction in the organization with the current state of affairs, right? So people will have to be dissatisfied with status quo, which is why when we were looking at that when to change curve, when you're growing in the growth phase, it's really difficult to for people to be dissatisfied, for you to feel dissatisfied, because hey, my incentives are great, my pay is great, I'm getting promoted, I'm getting new opportunities to travel, to learn new things, I'm happy, I'm satisfied. How am I dissatisfied, right? So it becomes difficult. So for change to take place, one of the first criteria, or the necessary condition, is that there should be dissatisfaction with the status quo. Uh, the second one is that there should be a clear vision or a clear desired end next state. So what is the goal? Where do you want to go? That should be clear. And F, which is what are the practical steps that you have in place, the first practical steps that you have in place to move towards that vision. You will see that this is a product. So D times V times F, which means that if D or V or F is 0, then the entire product is going to be 0. Okay, so this has to be greater than the resistance to change or the cost of change. Resistance from the people or the money that you will need to spend in order to make that change work. Only if all of this is greater than R can change take place. Okay, so this is another way to assess readiness for change. Okay. All right, so Neelam has a point that says our company has the following 3 bottom lines: provider of choice, employer of choice, and investment of choice. Fine. So these are ways in which you are, measuring what you value, right? So these, to a large extent, equate for you in same ways as profit. So if I'm doing great on being the provider of choice, then I'm doing really well. Good point. Okay, so coming back to the slide, readiness for change. I hope this is clear. If it's not, just put a message and then I will address it. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Okay, so one of the important things in any change effort is that you have to have a good understanding of the culture of the organization. Uh, Organization culture, like organization development or terms like leadership, have been defined, in numerous ways. Pretty much every person who has written a book or an article has tried to define, organization culture. In fact, there's a famous book written by this professor out of Stanford University called Joanne Martin. It's a huge, I think, like a 500-page book on organization culture, where she lists in painstaking detail. I think it runs into about 4 or 5 pages, about 100 different definitions for organization culture. Okay, so we will skip the tediousness of reading all those things and go straight to Ed Shine's definition. This is from his popular book, Organization Culture and Leadership. This guy has been a scholar, consultant, Uh, he's an old guy. He was an old guy even back then. Uh, Maybe he's alive. I don't know, but pretty famous. Just come up with a way to understand organization culture, which basically says that a culture of a group or organization is a pattern of shared basic assumptions that a group learns when it solves its problems. And when those solution problems are solved, and if those solutions work well, then they start gaining some validity, they start gaining some currency, so much so that those solutions are then taught to new members as the correct way of doing things, of thinking, perceiving, feeling about a thing. So that's how culture grows. So think of anything in your family, in your society, in your organization. What does your what are the values that your company or your family or your society, your community values, right? And you will start noticing when you go back in time that this is all the ways in which people tried to solve this problem. And some of those solutions stuck because they were very effective. And because those solutions were effective, they started getting transmitted over time, and then they became a part of the custom or the tradition of a particular place, of a particular organization. Okay, so this particular definition of organization culture captures that entire evolution of how culture starts becoming real in the organization. Okay, so let's look at a little more of what this Ed Shine's thing about culture says, that there are three levels of culture, right? So culture is visible or can be seen at three levels. One is at the top level, visible. What are the structures that are visible in an organization? You know, what he calls artifacts. These are the things that you can see. You walk into an organization, you can see the lobby, you can see the building, you know the address. You know, so say in Delhi, what is the fancy address for a company in Delhi? You know, somewhere in central Delhi will make you think like, oh, this company can afford an office in the central part of Delhi, so this must be a great company. Versus someone who's located in the outskirts, you know, on the highway towards some place, you know, far away from the center of the city. Maybe it's a fancy building, it's not, and not a rundown building. uh, think of a multinational company versus a government department. Their structures tell you to a large extent what their outlook and their attitudes are going to look like. Okay, while they are easily visible, they are hard to decipher because you don't know what is beneath all of that. At the next level, you have what is called espoused beliefs or values, which is what does the company say about itself. Okay, so this you get from the annual report where they talk about their goals, their vision. You go to their website, they'll tell you who we are, what we do, what we care about, what is our operating philosophy. These are things that they say about themselves. And then at the bottommost is the underlying assumption, the unconscious, taken for granted beliefs, perceptions, which actually are the source of all the values and the actions. So this is what drives it. Okay, so regardless of how lofty what the company claims it is these underlying assumptions that drive behavior or action in a company. So, with experience in your organizations that maybe you should not, uh, you know, ask the boss too many questions in front of two people, because say in our culture, asking the boss a question kind of means you're questioning his or her authority. That's the way it seems to work. You probably have seen it in school. We are afraid to ask the teacher a question. because of a whole lot of things, and that gets kind of carried over even when we go to work to the workplace as well. We are hesitant to ask questions because we've learned over time that if you ask a question, you know, or if you make a complaint or you make a suggestion, people take it differently, and then it becomes a problem. So another way to look at it is artifacts. What do you see? Espoused beliefs, what we say, and underlying assumption is what we believe. Okay. Oh yeah. So Arpita has shared. She says, "I had a senior who liked everyone calling him sir, unlike the rest of leaders." Yes, absolutely. Some people want you to be formal. Uh, I had a professor who would call everyone, very formally. Would address people very formally. He will say, "Mr. Smith" or "Mr. Whatever, anything, Mr., Miss." He would never call people by their first names, right? In India, people expect that you call them sir. And I mean, like, things have gotten so bizarre now. Okay, so anyone from Mumbai over here, I know that people get into trouble if they don't refer to Shivaji as Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, right? So that's the kind of extent to which people can become what do you say, caught up in how things have to be done. All right, so we are at 7:28 now. Okay, and we have 2 minutes left. So what I'll do is I will stop now with culture. Okay, so what we have done today is we have we've tried to understand what is organization culture, why what is organization change, why organization change, when to change, types of change, and also organization culture. Okay, I promise that I will post 2 articles for you to read, which I will do in a little bit later today. Do you have any questions? Okay, so don't log out because I have some homework for you. Okay, I'm going to just skip a couple of slides now. Okay, so next week we are going to. Next week we are going to have a quiz. Okay, next week we're going to have a quiz. It's going to be a fun quiz, so don't get too hassled about it. What I basically want you to do is to just revise what we've done today. I will post the slides also on your Google Classroom. And also what I want you to do is I want you to read that article that has been assigned to you, right, for change. It's called Change Management Leadership Guide. This is how it looks. Okay, it's a PDF document. It's about 30 pages. All right, so Ashish asks, where can we find the reading material article? Well, this I think has been shared with you. Where do the others get access? I know somebody said you have another portal where you can get all these materials. It's not Classroom, is it?
It's on the ISTD website itself, the dashboard. There are quite a few articles posted.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, so Ashish, that's where you can find it. Okay. Yes,
Yes.
it is on the ISTD website. And Neelam asks, in the next session, can we have 15 minutes for discussing the assignment? All right, so we'll try and spend 5 to 10 minutes, okay, not 15 minutes, because there's a whole bunch of things that we have to cover. But okay, we will spend some time on your assignment also. Okay. All right, so please remember to review the class material and also to read up that change management guide. It's 30 pages. It's fairly logically kind of sequenced. which is why I was reluctant to assign additional reading material, because my experience has been that the more reading I assign, the less reading that happens. So one article is better than 10 articles that never go read. Okay. Uh, but in any case, because I promised that I will share those two articles with you, I will do that. And I hope to see you all next week. Okay. In the meanwhile, I mean, I'll just hang around for a couple of minutes more. If you have any questions, you can, just chat, put in the chat box, or unmute and let me know. Okay. And there's a lot of material that we cover, so it's kind of important that we pay attention a little bit. And then, and if you have any questions, just shoot the questions, we can address it. All right, folks. So thank you very much for your patience. You've stuck around for an hour
Hi,
and a half
sir,
in the
Ajay Kumar
evening.
Shukla here, sir. I just wanted to add one thing, sir. I just wanted one request from my side.
Yeah.
Sir, if it is possible that a few case studies, if you can give us as a reference, that why the change was needed, when the change was done, and what was the effect of that change, positive or negative. If that kind of examples, or kind of organizational examples, if you can share, that would be
Hmm.
also helpful for us to understand the thing. So
Sure.
theory
Okay. So
part you
I'll
have
add.
already
I'll
done.
I'll
That is
put
great.
some. I'll put some case studies as well. Not a problem. Uh,
Thank you. Thank you.
okay. So here is the deal. So if I post a case study, I will have a quiz on it. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll post these additional readings, and I'll maybe a couple of. So actually, one of the readings has some case studies as well, but I will post case studies. Okay. And next week I will show
Yeah,
you where you can find case studies. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
way,
That will be great, sir.
it is better to learn how to fish than to give you a fish
Yeah.
every day. Okay.
Sure. Great.
Excellent.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you for that question, and thanks everyone. Uh, if you have any other questions, feel free to uh, chat now, or we can see you next week. And thanks to our friends, Mr. Arun and Mr. Alok, for sticking around and providing technical support.